Hi, welcome to a Just History book review, and today we're going to be reviewing two books, Amarna Sunrise and Amarna Sunset. So, first one, Amarna Sunrise here, published in 2014. I got it for $31, pretty good. And Amarna Sunset here, I got it also for $31, and it was released in 2009, though I'll get into this one a bit later. So, Amarna Sunrise. I quite like the book. It's definitely an Egyptology book. An archaeology book. I was looking for an introduction on the 18th dynasty, and I was really surprised when I found out that it's packed with a lot more than I would probably be able to handle. I'm used to reading history books that are pretty dry. I'll admit that they're just some of them are pretty boring. I'll put it that way, and they're meant for other historians and that, and they're mostly just reference pages for when other people can do research, which is pretty boring. I really liked Amarna Sunrise. Came out in 2014. It's pretty up to date with its information. I would like to see a revised edition at some point, though I'll get into that in the second book. Yeah, so talking about the book a little bit, it goes from the beginning of the 18th dynasty, so from the second intermediate period, talking about the Hyksos, who were the invaders that invaded Egypt and then were currently ruling. It talks about Kamous and Amus, who are the two that lead the liberation of Egypt at the beginning of the dynasty. It goes into that a little bit. It also goes into Hatshepsut a little bit, which is the female pharaoh, which Dodson goes into sort of some of the controversial theories about that and why that had happened. I'll give you a rundown, just more or less, that essentially Hatshepsut had made like a cult of personality. Her son was too young to rule. Her son was, I think, 5 at the time that she took over, or maybe a bit older. It might have been about 10, 13 or so. Yeah, so when Hatshepsut took over, she was a female pharaoh, which was sort of unprecedented. There had been female pharaohs before, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. For ancient Egyptians, they'd had female pharaohs before, though not like Hatshepsut. So Hatshepsut was different from other female pharaohs in the fact that she was a regent who then made herself pharaoh, and then stylized herself as a man, and then formed a personality cult, sort of using a 20th century dictator sort of term, a personality cult around her, and justifying her rule over her legitimate son, I suppose. Yeah, it's really weird, and you will need to read the book to understand it. But more or less, there's a lot to do with sort of Hatshepsut having like a miracle birth, always being destined to rule. So sort of being predestined to be pharaoh. More importantly, the book covers her son, Thutmose III, who essentially forms Egypt into an empire, battling various peoples from the Middle East. I'd use that term, which was probably a modern day term. Probably a more accurate term for the time would be Canaan, or Canaan. Not Canaan, Canaan. Canaan's a different thing. So Canaan is the land of Israel, Palestine, a little bit of Jordan, and a bit of Syria. So yeah, Thutmose III essentially leads Egypt to becoming an empire, conquering these areas, and starts ruling Egypt as an empire. Through this, we get Egypt coming into the Golden Age. So we learn about how Egypt forms over time through various pharaohs, and essentially starts to become a powerhouse. There's a chapter in the book called... I'll talk, before I get into that, I'll talk a little about the economy of ancient Egypt. And so Egypt primarily used gold to establish its empire, and other empires from the Middle East. So we're talking about the Hittites, the Assyrians. Actually, no, not the Assyrians. More the Mesopotamian states. So you're thinking like Uruk, Isha. I can't remember anymore off the top of my head, but we'll forget about that. Yeah, so it's talking about that and the interaction between them all, and how Egypt had the most gold, which formed the basis of its empire. And I think a quote from in the book, which I probably should write down and have information in front of me, is that gold is like a dust in Egypt. And the book explains that the economy of Egypt was more centered around gold and trading other commodities such as ivory, wood, which the Egyptians really needed, and talks about building monuments and stuff like that, which is the Golden Age. It also talks about religion. Now, if you know anything about ancient Egyptian religion, it's a pretty heavy subject. It is really hard to understand, especially when they start adding gods together. So the primary, I'd say the god, not assigned, sort of, it's hard to explain. I'd say the chief god that the 18th dynasty worshipped was Amun-Ra, or Amun-Re, or Amun-Re. Different pronunciations, different spelling, who knows. So this god was essentially it's two gods. Amun, who is, I believe, the hidden one. So, and I'll get into that in the second book. Amun is the hidden one, and Ra is the sun. Now, the book explains that during this time in Egypt, gods were being added together. So another one was Ra Horus. I'm not going to say the Egyptian name because my pronunciation is already bad enough. So yeah, it's explaining how they're adding gods together and how different aspects of God of the gods are being worshipped or formed into cults. So this forms the second half of the book, trying to explain the age of heresy. It starts with Amenhotep III and how Egypt sort of worships this one aspect of, I can't remember if it's Ra. I think it's both Amun and Ra. So for Amun, it's the hidden aspect, that the god is not visible physically. You can't sort of draw the god. And Ra is the sunlight itself. So I'll put up some artwork in that from ancient Egypt explaining this. But essentially, under Amenhotep III's son, Akhenaten, also known as Amenhotep IV, Egypt changes religion quite suddenly. In the 4th year of Akhenaten's reign, he changes the religion to the cult of the sun god, which I use that term very loosely. It's not really a sun god, more like a solar deity. Which it's hard to explain, but the book goes into it. Essentially, what Dodson says in the book is that the foundation for the cult of Artemism and Egypt's change away from its traditional gods, which there's like, I think, from like 125 plus gods down to just one single god that everyone worships. Yeah, that happens within this book. And Dodson goes into why that happened, how Egypt sort of changes over time towards the one god, and whether or not Akhenaten was a smart politician, recognizing that the priests of the primary god Amun-Ra had too much power over the pharaoh, and so he makes or formulates the cult of the Aten and institutes Artemism, so being one god. And so it goes through life in Akhenaten's new city, which is the city of the sun, so Amarna or Akhenaten. It also goes through Akhenaten's death, and it's hard to say, but Tutankhamun is covered, sort of, but not really. That's more in the second book, but I'll go into that in a couple of minutes. Overall, really good book. Don't buy it if you're just looking for an introduction to the 18th dynasty or the New Kingdom Egypt. You've got to have some background knowledge. And look, the book does have maps. It's got figures. See, look at that. Oh, whoops, get into frame. See, it's got that. Just evidence everywhere. So it will help you if you're trying to understand. other than that, probably don't buy it if you're starting out. I got it at a pretty good price. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about it. Would I recommend the book? Yes, I would. It is really good. There's a lot of evidence there. If you want to use, I'm talking statues, clay tablets, the whole shebang. Maps also. Maps are really good. Yeah, look, I'd say get it if you're probably like an intermediate period. Egypt joke. Ha ha ha. At an intermediate sort of knowledge understanding of the period, which I would, yeah, intermediate knowledge. So I'd probably say you've read, you know what the 18th dynasty is, you know what artanism is. Don't go jumping in fresh like I did, because you'll have no idea. I learned subsequently from that and this book, doing a bit more research, what the book was trying to say. The next book, Amarna Sunrise, I liked a lot more. And I don't know whether this is because I read Amarna Sunrise first, and the book is actually Amarna Sunset, not Sunrise. I'm an idiot. You'll recognise that throughout my reviews. Amarna Sunset was released in 2009. However, as you can see by the bottom here, fully revised and updated edition. Which is good, because it came out in 2009 and the information on the Amarna period following Akhenaten's death has been updated a lot. And Dodson goes into this in his preface of his book, saying that affecting over 75% of the pages, incorporating new evidence and smaller changes and correlations. So the book is fully updated for as of 2017. I'm doing this in 2018. Yeah, I hope that eventually this will also get revised and fully updated, because I'll probably buy that also and just compare. But yeah, I really like people that go back and revise their books on whatever history. It's usually history or science even. But like that, because it shows that they care. And that they're not happy just saying, oh yeah, this happened in then, and it's always been like that. There's no change to the story, and this book does change the story on what many people would consider Tutankhamun as the official story, and I'll go into that in a little bit. So this book was really, and I stress really, short and to the point, which is good considering that Amarna Sunrise covered about, I think it was a couple of 100 years. This covers about 50 all up, which is good, because it jumps right into it. You don't need to know, all you need to know is that Akhenaten's died, and they're trying to change the cult of the Arten back to the old gods, the orthodoxy of Egypt at the time, which was the many gods, specifically Amun-Re, and I'll get into that in a minute. So it goes over things such as like Nefertiti takes a very big role at the start of the book. Yeah, there is a couple of things I would like to point out that I didn't understand in the book about Nefertiti, which I thought was really good. It's just, it's hard to explain. You'll have to read it for yourself about the Nefertiti part, because I can't explain it. I have no background in, or a lot of research done about Nefertiti in that. Tutankhamun, and Horeb, I do. So I'll let you read, if you decide to pick up this Amarna Sunset, I'll let you pick that up and read about Nefertiti. I'll move on to Tutankhamun. So, after Akhenaten's death, there was meant to be another son that took the place of Akhenaten after he died. However, this son, and I can't remember his name. If I remember it, I'll put it up on the screen, probably in post-production. He was meant to take over, but died of a plague, I believe. Well, that's controversial. I think that's controversial. Also, I couldn't really pull that out from the book. They think that it was a plague. They're not quite sure. And Tutankhamun takes over. Tutankhamun is the son of Nefertiti, or so I thought the book was saying, though that was a little bit unclear, and they're looking for more DNA evidence than that, which the book goes into, and you can read about that. So Tutankhamun starts out as Tutankhaten. I think Tutankhaten. No, I got that wrong. Tutankhaten. Yeah, Tutankhaten. So he starts out as that, worshipping the cult of the Aten like his father. The book goes into how he changes that to become Tutankhamun. So changing back to the religious orthodoxy of the time. So that's what the book's primarily about, and by the cover you can say the Egyptian Counter-Reformation. It doesn't really go into the Counter-Reformation that much, of how much changed. And there's a couple of reasons for that, mainly because I think everyone just, from what I can tell, that everyone really didn't embrace the Aten cult anyway. And so when Akhenaten died, most people just went back to worshipping the old gods. They weren't really big on the Aten or the Aten cult. And that was because the priests of the many religions of ancient Egypt held a bit of power. So what many archaeologists and Egyptologists and historians and sociologists and whoever else wants to butt in on this argument figured out is that the priests definitely had sway over society. So though after Akhenaten died, many went back to worshipping Amun-Re, and eventually the old gods of Egypt came back. I won't go into Tutankhamun that much, apart from what Dodson points out about his death. So, as of 2004, I believe they had done a CT scan of Tutankhamun's skull and found there was a divot in it. So, it had been beaten in, more or less. And people thought, oh, well, the theory was that Tutankhamun had got a blow from behind and died. And they thought that A had done that, who is the pharaoh that succeeds Tutankhamun. That has thoroughly been debunked in this book and by other scholars. I'm not going to go into it. More or less, the CT scan plate was not aligned properly. So when they did the scan, it looked like he'd gotten his head beaten in when it really hadn't been. I'll move on to I. So I only reigned for 4 years, I believe. Don't quote me on that. He was the chief vizier of Tutankhamun, and essentially after Tutankhamun died, the line from the beginning of the 18th dynasty ended. I mean, there was a little bit of family connections between I and the royal family, but there's not a lot. I wouldn't consider him, well, I would, but I's just sort of a footnote, really. I mean, he kind of tries to keep the stability of Egypt, trying to go back to the old gods, but it's his successor, Horeb, or Hormeb. I don't know how to say it. I'm just going to say Horeb for the rest of this review. Horeb does a much better job, and you can see the rivalry between I and Horeb. Horeb definitely tries to make Egypt stable, and he does this by writing new law codes, making sure that Akhenaten's reign and the cult of Atenism and stuff like that is sufficiently covered up, more or less. You'll see in the book there's a lot of chiseled out, I think it's plaster, I'm not sure, I don't think it's plaster, but like a lot of the sculptures and that have been changed. A lot of the pharaohs have been defaced and that, so that people don't know who they are, which is a bit ironic, but we'll get into that at the end of the review. So Horeb, he essentially sets the clock back to 12 o'clock, saying, yeah, we're starting from here now. We're starting back with Amun-Re, all the old gods, and we're getting rid of the Aten and everybody else, and Egypt's going to be prosperous, and you're all going to love it. Horeb was also military. It was a military man, and this paves the way for the 19th dynasty, which unfortunately it's not covered in this book, the 19th dynasty. So if you're looking for something on the beginning of the 19th dynasty, probably don't get this. It does kind of cover the legacy of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Nefertiti, and Horeb. Not so much I, because I reckon I's a footnote, really. He only rules for 4 years, and it's really insignificant what he does. Though that's up to debate, and that's up to you. People who read this book, you might think he's really significant. I didn't really think much of him. Yeah, definitely would buy this book. It got revised, really good. If you want up-to-date information on the period after Akhenaten's reign, get this book. Get it, get it, get it. Yeah, it's just generally good. I mean, this book has about, I think it was 86 of the pages are just references, so it's not really a big book. All up, taking 86 off that, 212, take 86, you can figure it out. I'm not going to do it because it's maths. I don't really like maths, I'm a historian. Yeah, just get the book. It's good. All in all, this book, nothing to point out. This book was published first, so 2009, 2014. So Dodson went back and go, a lot of people didn't understand this, so I'm going to write this, which is good also. So I recommend that you get this first to understand both the beginning of the 18th dynasty and how the cult of Atenism came about and what happened to Egypt during that time. Then you read this and realize how the Egyptians are like, oh crap, we got it wrong, go back. And that is what you want, which is really good. And fully revised also, I can't praise that enough. It's just brilliant, really. Like, any author that does that is automatically got respect, because you know they care about their work. That's it. I'm going to be reviewing a couple of books from now on. What I'm reading is, let me just look at my bookshelf quickly. I don't know, I might leave it up as a surprise for you guys next time. This has been a Just History book review, and I'll see you in the next one.